rapidly. If you have any question, you know how timing works, right? First, one ring on the first minute, one ring on the 6th minute, and another ring on the and 2 rings on the 7th minute here, right? You guys are clear the motion? Okay, let's start. Without any more delays, I'd like to call upon the Prime Minister for the opening government. Here.
We think it's high time that academicians and students get to not only voice out their opinions without the fear of being persecuted, but at the same time actually being able to relay things that are based on analysis and things that are based on data, so that discussion can actually be utilized completely. Within my speech, you understand two things. Number one, you understand why it's critical for this platform to exist, so that informed choices can be made by individuals alike. And number two, you also know why discussion can still happen under a paradigm, and why it will ultimately be better compared to opposition's paradigm. Before that, let's characterize what this debate is necessarily about. Number one, when you're talking about university campuses, you're talking not only about the academicians that exist within the university, but you can also talk about the invited speakers. Now, we think that these individuals that are invited, or these academicians, already have an innate incentive to not just butcher the government or blatantly proclaim their hatred towards the government. They actually want concerns to be understood and concerns to be relayed and recognized. But not only that, they base everything on data, analysis, research papers, and all of these things that they have learned through over the years and they have been exposed to over the years. Now, the thing that is most important here is that whenever they want to relay some false information regarding that, there's an arbitrary metric by the government to say that, look, it's seditious or it's inciting hatred, when there's no real yardstick as to what that is. But number two, what are the limitations you're also talking about? You're talking about, obviously, the Sedition Act, right? Or all these other forms of legislations that are necessarily similar in nature. So these individuals, academicians, these students, like Adamati or Azmi Sharaf, or invited speakers, get persecuted or get ultimately demonized for the things they hold, for the things they said in journals, for the things they said in talks that may necessarily be peaceful in nature, but not seen that way by the government, because the government automatically has this idea that they're being attacked by the people as opposed to actually listening to the people, right? We think that the already check and balances that exist, even if these individuals do seem a bit more radical, students will automatically be exposed to the real world outside of the universities anyway, so they'll be exposed to all these other forms of counter narratives. But what side opposition excludes is a narrative that says the government is not always right. Our side does not preclude that. Our side allows individuals who are for the government or who are for the opposition to all be able to portray their ideas, right? Because it doesn't mean that just because you want to criticize a particular problem within the government that you are necessarily against the government. That is the idea that we want to also promote, right? That you don't necessarily have to be attacking the government when you're simply just stating that you're not happy with something that is happening. Sit down, sir. But why are academicians and students different? Not only do we think they base everything on research papers or data and analysis, but we think that the neutrality has to be maintained. They cannot be politicized. So at which point someone actually does release some form of information, we think that's automatically or ultimately for the betterment of society, not necessarily to promote the government or to go against the government. And we think that's particularly important, because at which point they do remain neutral, it's when it becomes more palatable to society, so that they understand it doesn't have to be radical in nature. No, sit. Let's move on to my first idea. Why is it critical for this informed choice, this platform to exist, so that informed choices can be made? When you're talking about political indoctrinations, you're talking about things that can range from, I don't know, your parents telling you should believe in something because, look, you're born in a family of a particular race, or you're born in a family of a particular institution, and because of that, you automatically have to form your choice based on that. We think that's particularly, that's not always bad. You can, affiliate something based on whatever is personal to you. But ultimately, when you think that that is the only form of narrative that can exist, or that is the only form of narrative that is right, we think it's particularly harmful, because you don't allow other ideas to be compared with the idea idea that you hold so dear. We think it's particularly harmful for everyone because the idea of informed choice doesn't exist, right? You basically don't have the means to be exposed to something, all these other forms of ideas and analysis to juxtapose ideas so that you are able to understand exactly what you are for and what you actually want. Why is this important? Because when you're talking about you self-actualizing within a society, it's not just about you blindly believing in something just because someone told you to. We want you to be able to understand that different forms of things can exist and still you will be able to make that informed choice. So you can still be able to be open to the criticisms towards the government, or you can be open to things like that are necessarily beneficial for you, and you will be able to actually see and compare these two ideas. We think there's a less likelihood for you to be that radical in your nature when you are able to compare ideas, because you don't think that that's necessarily the only interpretation or the only form of idea that can exist. So when you're talking of speakers or students or academicians, already we think there's a nature where you want to educate society as well. So they know not only what individuals to know about the problems of society, but the things that they can voice out upon, right? Those ideas that they want to talk about. So we think it's important for these limitations not to exist at university campuses, because it's important for for everyone in that institution to understand the value or the core value of actually voicing out your opinions. We think it's different from people on the ground where they actually blatantly just proclaim hatred, because number one, they already have an incentive to educate, but they already also base a lot of their opinions not on extremism or radical ideologies, but on actual data and analysis. Before I move on, yes.
How does this inform actually exist? This speech actually create hatred among the society, especially between races itself?
It doesn't create hatred, right? Because when you have impartial people or individuals that are necessarily supposed to be neutral in nature, talking about how these problems does not only affect a particular race, but everyone in nature, when it's core value, or that's when it doesn't become necessarily hatred, it doesn't incite hatred. But even your side has to understand that the things that these people say are like are fighting for, are like free and fair elections, or things to better the government. How are these things necessarily inciting the government when they actually want to criticize and actually want to make things better? But let's talk about why discussion will still happen and why will it be better in our paradigm. When you're able to juxtapose ideas, you are able to compare. We think that's when you are able to analyze things on several levels, right? You're able to see that something doesn't have to be radical. You don't necessarily have to simply put or simply stay with one idea. But we think it's also important because when you have like grassroots movements coming up, but then ultimately reaching or facing a brick wall, that's when you understand that your voices are not only silenced, but the government does not want you to have those ideas to begin with. It's particularly harmful because at which point do you mitigate how an individual feels or an individual understands the things that he is fighting for, right? We think it's important because it's no longer about, we think it's ridiculous when the government makes it about an ego battle. It's supposed to be, it's actually supposed to be what you can do to actually work towards bettering the country. That doesn't mean you have to switch sides, but you have to be open to criticism that could actually make you better. And then their side that doesn't exist at all. They have to engage in the case on how if these individuals want to criticize the government for the better, and if these individuals actually do peacefully engage, right, why is that still wrong? But number two, we think on second level, right, we think this idea of character assassination when you're talking about individuals who basically just want to talk about how they don't like certain things in the government, right? These individuals are demonized and they're persecuted by society. And we think at which point individuals on the ground who support those individuals feel emotionally attacked. That's when it's less likely for them to want to engage with two sides. That's when they're less likely to want to talk about the problems. So given all these reasons, go with psychology.
And then the prime minister calls for the leader of opposition to begin figuring with that side. Yeah.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. First of all, I, as the leader of opposition, I will explain the roles. My role is to rebut Prime Minister points, and then I will present my own points, and then my deputy of opening opposition will review the coming deputy opening minister, and then he will present some new points. Right. First of all, our motion today is this house believes that university campuses should be exempt from all legislation that limit freedom of speech. First of all, when we are talking about our motion, the Prime Minister should explain what is the context of legislation that we are talking about today. And then limitation of the freedom of speech. In what aspect? Is it only are we only talking about the freedom of speech against the government, or we are also talking about the freedom of speech against racial issues or international issues, and supposedly current issues as well? And then I, as the leader of opposition, of course, would oppose to today's motion. That is, this House believes that university campuses should not be exempt from all legislation that limit freedom of speech. Based on, firstly, when we are talking about the freedom of speech, sometimes academicians or, I'm sorry, firstly I would rebut the Prime Minister. She said that the academicians or the university students are likely to be able to have freedom of speech because they are saying it in a natural way. But when we are talking about academicians or university students who are nowadays talking about or giving speeches that is quite controversial, when we are saying that it is controversial, it means that it is not being spoken in a natural way. University students are not, sometimes university students are not really matured enough to do that. This is why the freedom of speech should be limited. And then because we in the opposition team believe and understand that not all university students are mature enough to be able to speak in such a natural manner and to be able to speak it in the context of the goods of all. Apparently, most university students are giving speeches that are mostly coming from their hearts and hatred about the government or the current issues. Yes?
Regardless of whether or not it applies to politics, religion, or race, these issues are branded as controversial and taboo because people don't want to hear these thoughts. Why is it justified for you to enforce that taboo and not let anything change?
Thank you. This is because we do understand that university students, like I said, not all university students are mature enough to do that in a natural manner. Therefore, you can have a freedom of speech, but to do that, we must understand and enforce that all university students should be mature enough, because there are different medium which you can flow out your concerns or whatever it is, your opinion that you have. And then I will go to my point, that is the sensitivity issues. When we are talking about the freedom of speech, of course we understand that sometimes people talk about the sensitive issues, and this should not be happening in the university campuses because of the environment in the university itself. Firstly, there are university students from different races, religion, and even nationality. There are international students. So, for example, if you are talking about MH17, if the university students talking about it is not mature enough, for example, if an international student who is not really thinking of the MH17 incident in a positive manner, then the international students might be saying something that hurt the hearts of the Malaysian students, because as we know, MH17 is a tragedy to Malaysia. And the freedom of speech, as we all know, is where you can state whatever your opinion is regarding any particular issues. For example, like I said, religion issues, racism, or national issues. When we are saying it in a negative manner, then this might build up the sentiments, negativity, and might also invoke hate among our university students, and maybe also the outside surrounding of the university, because as we all know, university students are considered as people who are mature and people who are good in assessing what is inside and outside of the campus environment itself. Yes?
Assuming that your characterization is correct, that students are immature, how do you get better than immaturity if not by having discussion?
Thank you. This is why, because if the freedom of speech itself is you can discuss, but then there should be limitations on the freedom of speech. We are saying that we are not saying that the students should not speak at all or discuss at all. They can discuss, but there have to be some limitations. This is why the freedom of speech should not be practiced in university, based on the things that I have said. Therefore, we should understand that university students are people who are good in assessing particular situations. However, we are still learning. Every human is still in the learning process, and the level of maturity might not be high enough to debate or discuss on certain particular issues. That is why the freedom of speech should not be allowed. Must be assessed on a good and reliable by good or reliable people based on different or particular issues. The process of learning is still there if you have limitations on the freedom of speech, because with the limitations of the freedom of speech itself, we are able to conduct a clear and natural way of discussion. With that, I thank you. Thank you.
Next is the opposition. I call for the deputy prime minister.
Side opposition only had one argument, and the only problem that they had was the problem with the characterization of the students within these universities, assuming that they are immature, assuming that they'll only incite hate. Number one, that's what we should step by your status quo, assuming that you can see into the problem, you're not changing that or bettering that at all. But number two, we think that the entire assumption has to change. It can only change by allowing a certain portion within society that's completely exempt from the laws of freedom of, from the restrictions of freedom of speech. That's what this whole debate is about. It's not just about allowing freedom of speech holistically, it's about a certain portion within society that's highly intellectual, highly academic, goes on the rhetoric that you need to have analysis and data, statistics, and information to back up whatever statement that you make in order for you to be credible at all or influential. This is the sort of portion of society that we want to promote. That's why it's extremely important. They missed the boat. Number one, they said that the problem, okay, assuming that there is hatred in society, please sit down. We say number one, that hatred within society, or the effects of the hatred in society is much worse under your paradigm. Why? Because it's completely unbased. It's bigoted and racial discrimination here and there, conservative ideas that have no counterbalance. That means that when the society, a large portion as a whole, even when you speak up, it's completely drowned out by the thousands of other voices that go against you. You cannot be that influential. What happens within our context? Our context within that portion of the university, it allows counter narratives. So that the moment that you speak up, there will always be a counter voice, another academician, another student, another invited speaker who can come there and tell them why you're wrong. This means that radical leaders are also invited within the university campus grounds, like Tariq Ramadan or Dr. Zakir Naik, or you can even have Halimisha, the CEO of Palestine, coming in and expressing their radical views, but also having students asking them, why are you sending your youngsters to die and get killed? These are the kind of counter narratives that you force these radicals to face. You force them to engage with the people on the ground, these intellectuals who are actually thinking who are going to graduate one day and become future leaders of that very state. That's why it's so crucial at the infancy stage of individuals of adulthood or teenagehood if you're entering university at an early age. That's why it's so important, because it cultivates you later on in your life to becoming progressive or productive people within society who also will enact change. That's also why, in the current status quo, we can only establish it within the university grounds. But before I move on, yes.
Assuming in your case, you talk about people are already intellectual enough to make decisions, why do we still have to be going on the ground, burning Malaysian flags here and there, disrespecting the country itself? This is your status quo.
You have to see the bigger picture. The point at which you have students who are burning flags, you also have other students who are condemning those sort of acts. We also have intellectuals who are condemning sort of acts. What am I going to talk to you about today? Number one, I'm going to explain to you principally why this is already happening under status quo. We still exempt certain individuals from the law on a large scale. But number two, why is this particularly exclusive, and why is this discussion good, especially in the context of democracy that we want to cultivate at the end of the day? Number one, principally, we already allow Democrats, we already allow prime ministers and certain influential leaders to go out and be exempted from any sort of law. Why? Because their very job itself, the kind of role that they have within society and within the global scope itself is so important that they cannot be tied down by these laws or restrict them from creating treaties with other leaders from other countries. Those are the sort of, they're exempted from civil and criminal procedures. We think that the point at which you already have the kind of immunity exemption for them, in order for them to fulfill their roles within society, to maximize productivity within society, we think that principles should also stand here. Why? What is the purpose of these intellectual discussions? What is the purpose of an academic institution or tertiary institution for that matter? It's the progression of the mind itself. The fact that you have to create intellectual discussions within that particular area. What am I specifically talking about? Lecturers who publish journals, lecturers who have classes, and students who listen to those classes need to have any sort of analysis and data and information to back up what they're saying. What does this mean? It means that they cannot have any form of barrier or restriction to what they're to the kind of opinions that they have. What's happening under status quo is that they do have the status, they do have the statistics and the research to back up their opinions, but they do not voice it out. What does this mean, and why is this harmful? This means it prevents other individuals from listening to these ideas, from being progressive and moving on and being innovative from those point of ideas, like moving on into society. It means that in 10 years' time, you may not actually know, you may not actually know the certain laws that would be better for that particular society as a whole, and perhaps not having special laws for the Bumiputras may not necessarily be good for the nation as a whole. You need to have counter ideas, as minority as it may seem, as unpopular and controversial as it may seem. They need to exist. Why? Because at one point in time, you're going to realize how important it is. That's why this kind of community has to exist within the academic sphere. How is this? How is this going to progress the democracy within society? The point at which you, as an individual, a potential voter for the future of your country, number one, but also potential leaders for the future of your country. For the voters ahead, when they have to choose the future leader of the country, they choose based on an objective manner. That means that perhaps within the limited scope of the university, that kind of information that has been elaborated can actually reach forth to other members of society who can see both sides of the coin. Not just extremely biased discussions within mainstream media or mainstream news and whatnot in terms of policies, not just politicians and what they're saying, but in terms of policies as well. This means that they can make objective calculuses onto who they're choosing or the policies that they're choosing at the end of the day. But number two, future politicians usually do come from the local sphere, from local colleges, within Malaysia in itself, and they should not be constrained by having these sort of barriers from speaking out their opinions or being influenced by these ideas at all. So these leaders who do come out or who do emerge from these universities at the end of the day can help cultivate it later on, and the trickle-down effect is so beneficial that you cannot help stop it now. What have I actually told you? I told you, number one, the exclusivity of this kind of area. We need to ensure the freedom of speech in its most absolute context. Even if there is hate speech, we argue and tell you there will always be the counter narrative, the counter discussion to that very hate speech. We think that, and number two, not just the counter narrative, but the fact is your credibility as an academician can only be established if you have data and statistics and analysis to back you up. The point at which you're just giving rhetorics, that means you're not a credible academician. You lose all form of credibility, you're not influenced within the academic field, you'll be shunned out. That's the whole point of this discussion. We take the debate. Yeah.
I think that the Prime Minister might want to be okay.
Fellow educators, government opposition. The question today is that should we allow limitations for students in university in certificates? Now, first of all, let us make a statement where limitation is not a restraint, but actually is a barrier that creates a freedom in the world that we wanted. Now, ladies and gentlemen, the first question here is what we refer as taboo. Taboo is something, of course, it's a big matter, like politics, racism, issues of religion and cultures. But this is one thing that we're going to expect coming out from the mouths of students like this, ladies and gentlemen. But especially nowadays, many students have actively considered themselves keyboard warriors. Now, before I proceed to my point, we've got slight things that our opening governments had to play. Now, exclusivity. When they compare students with politicians, it's something absurd. Because first of all, we don't have the qualifications. We are students, ladies and gentlemen, which is my first point itself. What we refer as students? Those who here to claim knowledge. We did not claim politics. Politics is another thing that we can define. But if we allow limitations, the statement that the government presents just now is as if we are trying not to let them to speak out their voice. But the question is very simple. We, the opposition, would like to let them do so, but at the limitation where we actually restrict at certain things, which is considered as taboo, which as the opening Prime Minister said earlier, ladies and gentlemen. Yes.
How are you going to enact a discussion when the future generation of your very state are restricted from expressing their opinions?
Thank you. Now, when I say expression, what they meant is speaking out loud. Thinking is another thing, ladies and gentlemen. Now, when we think about something and we voice it out, we consider that as the freedom. We consider it as a freedom of speech. But bear in mind, ladies and gentlemen, just because we cannot speak it out loud doesn't mean we cannot think about it. Okay, we are students. We can think about. We already think about progression. We can already think about problems that we can be solvable the next day. Because for now, we should be focusing on our objectives, which is being students, obtain the knowledge we require. Now, when we talk about politics, we consider it as an adoption game. Of course, we are considered as future generations. Thank you for the statement. But bear in mind, I said bear in mind, we are students. We refer ourselves as students. We are considered people within a barrier, within a limit. Right? Yes.
So, do you mind to explain specifically to what extent you are willing to limit the freedom of speech? Is it just about the government?
Okay. First of all, we're going to limit taboo, which is considered by the which is stated by the opening Prime Minister just now, where we talk about not just politics, but also racial issues, religious issues, the things that should not be spoken in universities. This is different. Now, first of all, why we want to do so? The next thing is we're going to talk about simply trying to retain the peace that we want to keep inside the campus itself. Now, when we speak out this racial issue, there's no 100% sure that these students are going to voice out for the whole students. There are still chances that they will voice out for themselves, which will lead some controversial issues that, for example, nowadays there are already some keyboard warriors have been stating out the question of touching the dogs, where it's illegal against the practice of our religion. We understood the concept, and now it's been spoken up by many people that these students are not qualified to do so. In other words, even if they could be voiced out, we actually have proven by the society that we are not qualified to do so. Yes, please proceed.
The things we're talking about will not exist because resentment will only be pushed under the rug. How do you then best mitigate the situation and not allow individuals to be angry at the government or anyone for that matter is setting the young?
Slow down, I couldn't understand. We should speak with our time.
This peace will not exist because resentment will be pushed under the rug. How do you best mitigate that situation?
I'm sorry, one time.
This peace will not exist because problems will only be swept under the rug and silenced. How do you best mitigate the situation and not anger people?
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we call it as a growing process. Okay, it takes time. Of course, for now we don't see the effect, but the effect will soon come out once we graduated as workers, where we are fully growing up and we have the rights to talk about political issues. Now, of course, we can't do anything, but we are students. Bear in mind, we are in a small world, and we are not supposed to be talking about the world outside beyond the barrier we're supposed to work on. In fact, we as the opposition are right now trying to speak that the students should be walking within the line have been drawn. For we are students only, I repeat, students only. We are considered immature, even though we are already above 18. Some will claim that we have the mind of the wisdom to do so, but we are still labeled as students. Even if we are still wise enough, think about the society. What does society view us as? Oh, he's a student. He's a keyboard warrior. What does he know? Of course, we consider his knowledge, even though we're smart, even though we have the knowledge we know. But still, the society accounts as nothing. So even if we do so, it's considered as no effects at all. So better than that, it already affects the student's performance, which is my next point. We are not talking about the students' performance also in university, where they should be focusing not on the politics. Yes.
It's different when you type and speak in front of your monitor because you don't have any accountability.
Okay, thank you, sir.
So,
right, nowadays, speaking now comes from your fingertips onto your tablet or your computer and tablets in different. Because nowadays, the media affects people more than any other ways. Now, what do we watch? Television, radio, internet, social media. What are those things? Those are now medium of communication. People will speak out or read or listen to those kind of media nowadays. They won't find anyone walking on the street saying that the problem is here, and they're going to speak it out loud like yes. Before you proceed.
Our paradigm focuses more also on the global aspect. Our paradigm forces people like Khalid Mishra to force him into immediate discussions and question his position as a Hamas leader. Under your paradigm, how do you do that?
Excuse me. One more time, please.
Under our paradigm, we force radical Islamic leaders like Khalid Mishra to force him into and engage in discussions and position as a Hamas leader. In your paradigm, how do you do that?
Okay, my paradigm is very simple. Of course, we are allowing those people to do so, trying to affect the minds of future people. But the question I said like before, just because we cannot speak it out loud, we cannot think about it. Okay, we can still think about the prospect, but we cannot. It doesn't mean we're defining the process. But the issue we can brought to the future, where we are more suitable for the condition. Right now, we are still students. We are most priority to study. Politics is something that we should not be injected into the university world. Because once we live in this society, in the world of university, students are supposed to gain the knowledge that they require to become future people. In fact, here's the one image. If we just simply talk about politics, which affects our studies, we will not focus more on class. What will we do in the future? Just another loud talking undergraduate people. So what should we do now? Is for the prospect of the future, where we should be studying first. And once we graduate, once we acquire the knowledge, acquire the qualifications that people recognize us as individual intelligence, then we can work it out. But for now, within the university, very far within the line, we will limit the fitness. With that, I must say thank you.
And then the deputy in opposition to move on to the closing comment of the member of the
Morning, Madam Chair. So first, rebuttals. So coming from side OO, the whole crux of their argument is mainly on how they exaggerating the impact of all these opinions coming from the university students, and all the whole arguments are emphasized on all the consequences and all the negative sentiments and all the hatred and the retaliation that might happen because of those opinions that might not be accepted by the people. But so why coming from this side is they are leading a very conservative society, and their society is not progressing, it's very stagnant. And we see no engagement of these sides to opening up this argument, absolutely no. And also, there is only one response to their argument, because that's the only argument that they have. So, by exaggerating the impact, our responses is, even if you don't believe that every university student have the same level of maturity, but we believe that every university student, that at least they are every reasonable person like us, they are able to analyze and interpret everything that they say, even if their opinion is not accurate. There will be natural check and balances which will come under my speech. So when there are some extreme opinions that are unacceptable by society, in the way they express it, people get to know it, so people can correct it. So we think that that's the best way to correct the people and let the people aware of his own mistakes. So that's the best thing and good thing of the freedom of speech of a university student. And also, we think that on one hand, when one people give us a very extreme opinions, and on the other hand, people have the other sides, the opposite side of opinion. When two opinions are on one hand and the other hand, they achieve a neutral situation where the opinion will be neutralized, and maybe that's the best. When that's the best opinion, that's best fitted the society. So that's a solution I gave to the opposition. So what's government wants to bring you today? So coming from open government is willing to defend
it's willing to defend. It's only willing to defend the moderate's opinions, and only coming from DPM, the last 30 seconds of her speech, that they might be willing to defend hate speeches as well. But coming from CG, we are going to tell you we are going to defend hate speeches as well, because we think that there's no ways you can assume, or you can make sure that students always make accurate analysis and accurate interpretation before they express any opinions. That's the reason why CG are willing to defend hate speeches, because we think that this is the main issue that we should access, because we believe in natural check and balances, and also we believe that university is the best starting point of how we liberalize a conservative society and uphold the democracy. So this come into my extension, yes.
You know, there's a limitation.
Sorry, again?
There's a limitation once you let allow students to be able to do so. Remember, bear in mind, not all students have the same intelligence. There are some who will speak out the irrational issues.
Yes, sure. There are people who speak out the irrational issues. We recognize this point. That's why we say there is natural check and balances. When the opinion is good and it generates discussion, generates discourse, people discuss it, and the best opinion will float into the surface, and people start to accept that. When that opinion is particularly extreme and people is unacceptable by society, people will tend to resent that opinion, and that opinion would not be propagated further. That's how we differentiate what's the good opinion, what's the opinion that best accepted by the society. So moving on to my substantive, why freedom of speech is so important, and why university is the best place, and why students, the stakeholder of the university, which is the students, is in the best position to enjoy this privilege. So we think that we have to consider what's the nature of these students, right? These students are in the midst of curiosity, they are still currently in the learning progress, and also they are trying to learn how to be critical, how to analyze, and how to interpret. And also we know that the government is currently endorsed that they want students not be book smart, but also be critical, knowing how to analyze stuff and how to analyze issues, not only to study what's inside the classroom. And also we think that students are undergoes a lot of confusion, and maybe because of their family background, or maybe because of the situation that they are indoctrinated in, maybe they have some preconceptions, and maybe they will possess some stereotype on certain issues, certain kind of people. So that's why expression is important. We think expression is the result of interpretation of the social and economic conditions and issues and situations that students interpret and then analyze, and only then you have response to all these norms and being critical. And also, it's on this point that we think that they should be allowed to express, because only in this way they know that whether they are correct or they are wrong, because of natural check and balances. So moving on, my second level of analysis, how natural check and balances is important. We think that when the good ideas that is allowed to propagate, when it's in line with the social behavior and it's not devoid of moral utility, it will eventually be accepted by the society. So we think this is good. And the bad, of course, will be eliminated eventually. So this is the nature check and balances is current existing under the data code, which everyone should recognize. And also, when the idea is something that's excellent, we think that people will come, since that everyone shares is at the same playing field, everyone's allowed to express their opinions in the university level. Every student enjoys that privilege. We think that the bad idea will be challenged when the ideas have extremely actually no contribution to the society. The ideas will be challenged, and in line with the social evolution, the dynamic changes, the more adaptive opinion will be accepted, and the best one will be maintained, and eventually benefits to the society. And this is my second extension on how it liberalizes the conservative society and the nation as a whole. So we think that mindset is very important, and the students, they should have the best mindset, because they are the pillars of the society. So in order to build a country, to liberalize a country, we should start from the students itself, because we think that students, they are the best assets of the university. They are able to integrate their knowledge and put it into practical sense and practice in real life. So we think that the form of expression is how they actually utilize their knowledge that they earn, knowledge they obtain in the university, and how they practice in real life, and how they benefit the society. So further level of analysis on why is the freedom of expression good in liberalizing the society towards a more democratic society? We think that expression is something like when you reveal the information, there's a difficulty of the retrieval of information. So
when this difficulty of retrieval of information will form some form of pressure to the government because of those opinions that's already propagated in the society, already create discourse, government will have some form of pressure to engage with this idea and how we change the society, right? So we think that this allows the country to become a more people control country and no opposite state control, and political views be allowed to express, and it helps in the quality and of the political situation for the country. So for all those reasons, we are very proud to propose.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, today's debate seems that the government side have two wrong ideas about the status quo. First of all, when you have legislation that limits the freedom of speech, the government is not a separate body from the society. The government's legislations are according to what the society needs, what the society thinks, what the society culture is about. When you have the legislation that limit the freedom of speech, these legislations are made because the society is not yet ready to accept new ideas. When you have a society that's against women, for example, not wearing a veil, you cannot go around and talk about LGBT problems. The society is not ready to do that. Why? And then another thing that they talk about if we can remake universities do not have any limitations, do not have freedom of speech. You have people talking about things, and you have society change and what's not. But we need to think here. We need to think here that the university is not some sort of asylum that people live there. No, people go out of university after you taught and said whatever you said. You go out of university. It does not. You create an unsafe environment for the person who talks. Like for example, if the person were to enter the university and talk against the government, he goes out. How do you know that the people who follow the party of the government will not attack him? Having said that, now let's go to some rebuts. First of all, the idea, I'm going to read the something of the idea of teaching critical thinking, a lot of assumptions here, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, this is not necessarily make cause critical thinking, but even if this, let's say it does cause critical thinking, like if you have debates on this course, we need to understand that there already are activities in the university that cause this thinking, or have a lot of activities, events that is organized by the university for the students to actually gain these skills. There is already syllabus that is made for these things. You don't really need these things like this now. The debate will lead to the best outcome. There's also another assumption here, another assumption that the students will become leaders. Okay, like seriously, come on. Again, I'm telling you that if the students were to talk about, if the students would have absolutely freedom of speech, again, they might come with ideas that are radical, ideas that will cause unsafety to them after they come out, after they go outside the university, because of course their ideas will follow, the people who heard them will follow them outside the university. So freedom of speech inside the university is just an assumptive idea that cannot really happen in the first place. Delete government oppression. Yeah, they have this idea that after you do this, you delete the government oppression against different views. Again, I'm telling you, when the government has limitations, it's because the society is not ready for it. So you can't really delete the government oppression against views that are not according to what your ideas state. Going into my arguments now. Enjoy. Yes.
Personal security should be an issue because attacking another individual is already illegal. Justify in your part of the house why we cannot have exclusive area with a society where it's congested with smart individuals to have the discussion. Yeah.
Let me tell you why your idea is completely assumptive here. Because first of all, I come from a country, Sudan. I studied in the University of Khartoum. The University of Khartoum had absolute freedom of speech, when outside the university there was no freedom of speech. A student came and talked about politics, the student died, the university was shut down for 3 months, the university ranking went down, the research opportunities all went off, and all of these things were caused because freedom of speech were allowed inside the university, and that's why I'm here in Malaysia, by the way. Anyway, let's go into the actual what happens if we allow freedom of speech. First of all, when we allow freedom of speech, we create a political platform inside the university, as stated by them, but they have a very assumptive outcome to it. When you have the university becoming a political outcome, what you have here is we have an opportunity for radicals. We have an opportunity for people with ideas that are not always good. You have people promoting ideas that are not always with what the culture wants, with what the people want, with whatever the society needs right now. You also have, this will cause two things here. This will, first of all, this will cause unsafe environment, because when you have radicals, of course, you have radicals, you might, even the debate, like I said, the people are not always ready to have a discourse, to have a constructive debate. So when you have people who are not ready for such a debate, you might even have, like, for example, fights after the debate is finished, like you will have the students going fighting against them. And then it creates some sort of unsafe environment. You might even have intrusion by the state to organize the people, to organize the speech. And in such cases, like again, unsafe environment. And university is absolutely affected by this in three ways. First of all, you will have, like I told you, research opportunities will stop, like because you might even, if the state is to introduce to settle down the arguments between the people inside the university, then you might even have the university shop, as I said in my example, and you have access to research opportunities going down, you have the ranking going down, and now you have even less intake by students. Students are no longer motivated to even go to universities right now. Why? Because it's an unsafe environment. Their parents might even not agree to them going to that university. Why? Because it's an unsafe environment. They have people talking about things against the society, against the culture, against whatever. So you have all this, because the university in the end is an education center. It's a center. It's a place where science is created. It's a place where science is motivated. It's not a place where politics is motivated. It's not a place where, yeah. So again, another thing to this is that, like I said, education is no longer the focus here, because that you added a new idea to university, which is a political platform, which is not something that is not good. But you have people defocusing from education and to focusing to other things, and you have like jeopardizing the student status as a student, like his GPA or whatever. Like, again, you have people focusing on stuff that are not what the university is made for. Hey.
So can you specifically explain to me why a reasonable person are not ready to express any opinion of what they see and what they feel and what they think about something that's so closely related and what happened in front of them?
We do agree that people should have a discourse. We do agree that discourse does have benefits, but not always. Does have benefits in some cases, but we just do not believe that the university is the venue for this discourse to happen. And then again, like I said, you have a very wrong idea about legislation. Like, this legislation do not limit freedom of speech completely. This doesn't come from the state. Do not limit freedom of speech completely. They limit the freedom of speech in stuff that the society is not ready for yet. Going into another thing, let's talk about how change happens. When you have legislation coming from, like I said, government legislation is actually about my points exactly. But when you have the government legislation coming from like culture and religion, you need to understand what they limit and what they do not limit. Like, they limit stuff that like I told you, like they're not yet, the society is not ready for, the society is yet to adapt with. So, and they limit, they create limits to that. They do not want the society to talk about these things because they know how it can create unsafe environment, can create unconstructive arguments, it can even create, like I said, an unsafe environment. So, to have change, you need something, you need arguments, you need debates about stuff that the society cares about, the society can actually accept. And with that, I
think the member of opposition, I call one the government.
Yes.
The only argument coming from closing opposition is that physical retaliation. That means people will commit physical violence because you allow those ideas, those extreme ideas to be exposed, that actually will happen seriously, and even more as a higher possibility if you don't allow them to speak. Why? Because this is not our burden to prove that there will be absolutely no violence in the nation, when there's personal hatred happening everywhere. Because I can just call you something else that is not against the government. I will still hit you, I will still commit like personal violence or like physical violence. That's not something that we can prove to you that we can eliminate. However, we can prove to you how restricting people from speaking makes the retaliation more serious and higher possibility to happen. So if I have so many ideas about the government, and the government disallow me to speak about these ideas, so the only way for me to express myself is to do something violent to the government, or at least on the street, at least to the people. That means, like to your best extent, a debate is long, like the discourse will happen very long, and the outcome will be very hard to achieve. We allow that in that situation, as compared to a student carrying a gun to portray the idea, let's say, like killing other students in the school, to portray to go against the idea of the government allowing the right to bear arms because they think guns is harmful, so they show the government rather than just talking in a concourse or talking in an area that talking the government is supposed not to have this right to be given. It is much more beneficial. At least it's the words is much more less violent, it's much more less harmful to what you actually commit in the physical sense. Then we think this is the harm that you're trying to portray, you fail to prove it. So this debate went extremely messy in opening half. So there are two very separate opinions and went very parallel. So OG wanted to allow a specific portion of the university that are deemed smarter, that is like more intelligent than anyone else, to enjoy freedom of speech. And OO wanted to ban everyone in the nation to speak freely about the government, about politics, about religions. Everything, both things were very narrow in terms of characterization. It's very hard for us to move further from the debate. This is what CG actually contributed. It's trying to push the debate into a further extent in a wider range of ideas that will allow freedom of speech up to all university students. And we think they should be allowed to, they should allow the policy to all university students, and in the long run, we hope the nation can also allow the freedom of speech to be given to all citizens, to to everyone in the society. That we think, as a whole, we need to be consistent in terms of the arguments itself. So, like in closing, like we are willing to push the debate further and find most of the bullets that opening failed to prove. Because first, we are fine with all university students having to enjoy like no restriction when they're discussing sensitive issues, to most sensitive issues such as politics, religions, and even challenging the social norms or discrimination or just stereotypes. Because the reason behind this is that when we allow this policy to be introduced, we can't restrict other individuals in the same. We can't restrict other individuals in the same circle. This creates more harms in OG's case. Second, why we do not think this policy is not going to harm the society, but indeed benefiting the people in the long run. Because there are always different groups in the society to moderate out extreme opinions. Because when I say black people are bad, of course some people that support black people or support even black people itself can come out and prove where you are wrong. And the thing that OG lacks is that these arguments need to be proven and needs to be supported by evidence. This is better for students because when you have evidence, you build on constructive arguments and you have things to support you. You are more willing to find constructive arguments by just speaking, not speaking in the vacuum. There is no evidence to prove. Then people find hard to believe in you because when you make an opinion, you always want more support from the society itself. Before that,
constructive or not, we stick to right because it's a sensitive issue.
Okay, the sensitive issue will not be a sensitive issue anymore if you allow freedom of speech to be given to anyone in the society. Because what is it sensitive? Because someone can say it, someone might harm anyone in the society. That's why you deem it sensitive. Because when you always allow these words to be called sensitive, you are just allowing the stereotype to be perpetuated, and you allow these negative ideas to forever not getting any challenge from any society, and the progress will never happen in a nation. And we think it's harmful. Then what CG again progress? I already explained to you. No, thank you. So it's very crucial when evidence is the crucial element to win an argument, because no one will simply trust you by just not giving any evidence or any analysis on that. So that students who therefore, like students who want to express an opinion and win that opinion, that they will find many evidence and grounds to prove that they are right. If they can't, it's self-proving. It's self-proving that they are wrong, so they will know eventually they are wrong, so that they can remove the ideas from their brains. itself, then we think this can only happen when we allow them to talk, and we know what they are trying to say, what they are thinking about the society, what they are thinking about the government, rather than just hiding all the secrets and having all the hatred in the heart itself, having all the hatred in the mind itself that we can never see. And in the long run, it only harms the society, because these individuals will never change their opinions, and these opinions are mostly negative in nature. So ideas are subjective. This is the second idea in this debate. So no one can say for sure an idea is right or wrong. Like no one. Therefore, like the more discuss is allowed, that means you allow the free market of idea to happen in a wider range of area, that a more moderate and accurate outcome can be achieved. That means we are not seeing a right outcome. There's the moderate outcome. What does this mean? That means the status quo changes all the time, like time to time. Maybe today and tomorrow might be different. So when we allow continuous challenge or continuous ideas to be propagated into the society, this will only allow the new ideas that are best fitted into that situation to be given, rather than just one textbook or what government has in terms of educating the society, educating the people. We want this progress to happen. We want this change to happen, because when this change is happening, the government will feel pressured and will want to change the policies to cater to the new situation, to benefit the people in the long run. That we don't think restricting this free market of ideas in anywhere or in any sense is beneficial. And why is it so important in tertiary level of education? Because feeding knowledge do not ensure right things to be taught to students, like just simply not true. The students are individuals who have weak preconceived notions as compared to other individuals in the society, and easy to be challenged because of them being curious to many things. So if their opinions have some form of truth in it, most of the time they will win. If they are wrong, it's self-proving that they will be wrong. And this discourse and this idea will only happen when you allow free market of ideas to happen everywhere in the nation, but start with university.
And then we just put my call on the last speaker of the
Ladies and gentlemen, I think so people do not understand why the Sedition Act is here in the very first place. Why the Sedition Act here? Because bad things has happened in the past that has created to push us to actually why we're doing the Sedition Act. Firstly, why has it done it? Because we had students actually entering the political arena. We had students running into the streets, burning down Malaysian flag. And we do not want this to happen. These are the things that instigated by the Sedition Act that actually happened today. And that is why we do not want students to actually enter into the political arena. People do not want these people to actually racial discrimination to happen. Instead, the student itself. So let us move on to the issues that happened to the debate today, right? Firstly, on the importance of discussion itself, because they also talk about the idea, but they invite the speakers to come in, right? They allow the students to think, they allow the students to have to make the rational decisions and whatnot, right? These students are capable of making the decisions and whatnot. The half they do not see here is that when you have these people who actually these outside speakers to come and speak, right? You are inciting this idea that racial discrimination can occur. You're inciting that you have freedom to actually talk about whatever you want, right? So these people can talk about whatever they hated versus me, despite the fact that they have data analysis. Persuasion comes into the idea. Because even despite the fact that you have the whole data analysis, right? Persuasion takes into place. And discussion doesn't happen anymore because the whole idea of racial discrimination happened. And people are partition of society occurs in their situation. And let's talk about hate speech itself, right? When you have people, invited speakers coming into your own university, talking about bad about your own government, or talking about the opposition badly, right, ladies and gentlemen, because this incites hatred among the government itself or the opposition itself, and we do not want that to happen. We do not want biases to happen inside the university itself. So we want to mitigate the problem. That in their brand, they do not mitigate the problem from the very beginning itself. So when you have limitations in the freedom of speech, when you have people do not have talking about the bad, the hatred towards another society, right? Topics of sensitive are omitted, and you have omission of the sensitive topics, right? You do not incite hatred among society, and when you do not have incite hatred, right? This is when discussion happens, healthy discussion happens, and with healthy discussion, healthy decision also happens. And before that, on the second idea, the purpose of institution, they argued on the whole purpose of institution that is firstly to progress the society. Now, ladies and gentlemen, answer me one question. How do you actually progress the society when you actually further radicalize the society, these university students, in university vicinity itself? How do you radicalize this situation? My closing government here, closing opposition has clearly stated to you a situation in University of Khartoum itself. When you have when you make university itself as a political arena, political platform, where political intrusion happens from inside within the university itself. So the purpose of education is no more being catered to from the very beginning. The purpose of education, why is university there, is for you to educate yourself. And when you have political intrusion happening inside the vicinity of university, you already include the whole purpose of university itself. And more brainwashing would happen. More, even despite the brainwashing, despite the whole idea they have having data analysis and whatnot, right? The brainwashing will still happen because persuasion comes into the bigger picture. Because despite the whole idea, when I stand here, I have all data analysis, but you still have to listen how persuasive am I, how I deliver my idea and whatnot, right? So persuasion comes into the picture, the whole idea of media itself. So this is how it creates partition inside the students itself. And when you have create partition inside the student levels itself, right? When they progress into the society, they continue the partition, they continue the hatred and their biasness towards one part of the society. So this is why you do not produce a mutual society, you do not produce a singular society, or you produce harmony, but you create more harm towards one part of society. Yes, Rosie.
How is not allowing someone to speak? Remove the discriminative mindset in itself. Like,
ladies and gentlemen, we are not removing someone to actually speak, right, ladies and gentlemen. We are not allowing them to speak freely. We are not allowing them to speak some sensitive issues only. You can go out and speak whatever you want. You can go out and speak about what are the benefits of joining a debate competition, what are the benefits of actually building a company, ladies and gentlemen. But we do not want you to talk about bad things that maybe incite hatred to one part of society, because inciting hatred will only develop into something more severe. And in Malaysia, it's already something already severe, because we already have different parts of society already having a situation, and you further on elaborate the situation into university itself, and on the whole idea when the student closing already brought that these people are actually learning how to be thinking critical. And the whole idea that this society are learning to be thinking critical. When these people are learning to think critically, right, how are they capable of making informed decisions? Because they do not have the capability of thinking critically in the very beginning itself. Yes, they go through education. Yes, they go through a learning curve and whatnot, right? But yeah, you have to understand they're still young. Yeah, that is why they're still at university level and whatnot. And on how our paradigm caters to this progression of society itself, right? Because we do not drop the image of university. Because when you go out and talk about political incitement, right, or talk about hatred and whatnot, right, what you create is you bring the name of university, and this is what we do not want, because we do not want third-party harm to occur. Something exclusively brought by the closing opposition here, because we do not want third-party harm to occur here. Because when most of you step out from the university, whatever you speak here, right, you are actually bringing the name of university, and this is what we do not want. We do not limit your freedom of speech, despite the fact that after the university, after your studies, right, you can still go outside there, you can still talk about the political, whatever you want to tell. But inside, when you're still in the vicinity of university, obliged whatever it is, obliged to take the image of the university and whatnot. So that is what we want to do. We hold on the whole idea of organicity simply from the closing opposition. And thirdly, my issue today is the importance of freedom of speech. But before that, yes, opening.
Hatred may happen under our paradigm, but at the very least, we still allow a better response and expression to that by having calculated and rational information. What's your response to that?
Simply the whole idea, I told you, even the fact that you have rational ideas, rational analysis, right? The whole idea of persuasion comes in, ladies and gentlemen. The whole idea, when you have data, no matter what not, right? You make a small problem seem bigger. When you make a small problem seem bigger, this is where you actually brainwash someone to actually hate one part of society, hate one part of government. And this is what we don't want to happen to begin with, right? So in their whole idea, they're not solving the problem. We are actually solving the problem because we're creating more discussion, ladies and gentlemen. And the third idea of importance of freedom of speech, because they talked about how the benefits is to propagate idea and get more informed. I have told you just now itself, like these people do not have the rational cultures. Yes, these people are going to university. Yes, these people are learning how to think, right? But still, they are still young minds. They still do not have rational culture to make the decision. They are still buying to the idea of whatever that comes to them. Brainwash happens, whatever happens. Right? So that is why we do not limit, we do not believe that the university is the best place for political arenas to happen, racial incitement that will happen. So that is why we strongly call that this legislation should not be exempted. Thank you.
I think also or shake hands or how you guys can.